Hey everybody, welcome to All Over Bar the Cricket. Today we have a very, very special guest, a legend of English cricket and a man who, since he finished his illustrious playing career, has written about and spoken about the game for a long time very, very well. Louis and Haydos, I speak of Michael Atherton, who's on the line now. Athers, thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Pleasure. I can't say I'm overly looking forward to it with England 2-0 down. Like walking into the back of the Triple M commentary box if a wicket's just fallen. You're all sat there just waiting for me. But nice to be on. Nice to see you all.
I was going to say, I've always loved the way you've seen the game. How have you seen the last 6 days? What's the one thing that's stuck out for you? Last 6 test days.
Well, the 6 days of cricket, I mean, it couldn't have gone any worse for England. Obviously, we came here with high hopes. Those of us who followed this England team for the last, since Stokes, McCullum and Key got on board in early 2022, we've seen some incredible performances from them, albeit they haven't, nailed a big series against Australia or India. But I think we came with high hopes. Partly because of what we've seen England do, the feeling that it's a good Australian team, but maybe not a great Australian team, one that's coming to, the end of its shelf life, if you like, given the age of some of the players. And, that combination gave us a little bit of hope. But it ain't gone well.
Athers, I'm going to put you right on the rack here, considering that you're expecting it, so I don't want to let you down ever. You are now England captain. Ben Stokes has been fired, which is more than likely what's maybe going to happen at the end of the series if you lose it. What are you saying to the England change room right now? How are you going about your preparations as a captain?
Well, firstly, I don't think regardless of how it goes, I don't think Ben Stokes will be a casualty of this tour. I think while he's around, he's going to captain England. That seems to me a given. He's been an outstanding England captain so far. So put that one out there straight away. I mean, there may be casualties elsewhere, but I don't see the guns kind of pointing in his direction. Right now, before this Test match in Adelaide, England have to stick to their guns, don't they? I mean, they've got to where they are playing an aggressive brand of cricket. And clearly Adelaide's going to be a little bit different in terms of conditions to Perth and Brisbane. Less maybe pacey, less bouncy, shorter square boundaries. I think they have to stick their guns and back themselves. I mean, I don't think anybody wants to see them playing reckless cricket. But I wouldn't like to see them go completely into their shells as well, because the DNA of this team is to try and get on the front foot. And they've got this far doing it. And I don't see any value in completely retreating from that. So it's not more of the same, obviously, because what's happened so far hasn't been good. But it is to remember what's got them this far, which is playing a pretty aggressive brand of cricket. And to be honest, the Bazball stuff gets slightly weaponized against them. I've never heard one England player or a member of the management team use that phrase Bazball. It was coined by a member of the media, in early 2022 when things were going well, when they'd just come in. But they've never referred to that or never talked about it. But, they have played an aggressive brand of cricket and it's got them this far.
I was looking more for an any given Sunday type response, I got to say, Athers, and that's given me nothing but a soft on. I want you, the captain, to give me a rousing display of, boys, we are 2-0 down. What the hell is Mike Atherton, the captain, going to say?
Well, listen, Ben Stokes is a completely different character to the character I was, and he's captained in a completely different way. And he's been an outstanding England captain. There is no question about that. He's been one of the best England captains that I've seen in the long time that I've been around the England team. So I've got a bit of faith in him, and I think he'll rouse the team to a response this week. after chilling on the beach at Noosa. Noosa, they'll get down to business in Adelaide, and I'd expect a response. I think you saw that from the comments after the game from Ben Stokes. He was clearly ticking in that immediate post-match conference, the bit he did with Isha Gua. He was clearly ticking. And I think you'll see a response from England this week for sure.
Athers, in your heart of hearts, and you see England cricket team play just as much as anyone else. Before the series started, did you see the style of play that they were trying to play? Did you see that stacking up in places like Perth and Brisbane, the first 2 Test matches?
Well, it's obviously a little bit different, isn't it? I mean, the big mistake, I think, on the tour was the preparation before the first test. I was there at Lilac Hill, and, we've all been to Lilac Hill. You know what it's like. It's a kind of country ground. Pitch is a bit slower and lower than you'd expect at either the Wacker if you were playing there or the Optus. And just an internal game against the Lions was kind of inadequate prep for what was coming there, really. 60,000 at the Optus on a fast, bouncy pitch. After that, I don't have any problem with England having not gone to Canberra or having gone to Noosa. I mean, what do people expect for them to lock themselves away in a darkened room and eat bread and water? You clearly in between Test matches, it's fine to kind of rest and recuperate and freshen up. But I think the mistake was prior to that first test. You've got to have a little bit more prep, I think, than 3 or 4 days at Lilac Hill. To answer your question, I mean, obviously they didn't acclimatise or accommodate the bounce at the Optus or Brisbane very well. A lot of the batsmen have been driving on the rise, and that's clearly difficult in Australia while the ball's new in the first 20 overs. You've got to earn the right to be aggressive. But as I said before, I don't think they should back down away from that intent to score quickly and be aggressive. That's what's got them here. That's part of their DNA. You just got to temper that and measure it a little bit. We all know what it's like at the start here against the new ball. You have to fight hard to get in, and you have to earn the right to be attacking, and that's what's been costly for them so far. And I'd expect to see both a reaction to that, and obviously Adelaide, well, assuming it's still pretty much like it used to be, is going to be a little bit different to the first 2 games.
Athers, there's nothing wrong with bread and water, mate. Our ancestry's been deeply routed in the fact that the cat of nine tails and the lashings that we got in early doors for 200 years has served us in good stead. I just want to change gears a little bit. I want to know, Athers, the commentator and writer versus the combatant Athers, captaining England and doing a really nice 33 tests, I think you played against Oz. What's your perspective of Australia, and how has that changed from on-field to now off-field?
That's a good question. I don't think, from what I've seen, that much has changed in Australian cricket. In that, I first came, a long time ago, 1988, the under-19, the very first under-19 World Cup was a kind of celebration of the bicentennial, I think, 1988 in Australia. I'm in Adelaide now, and we came for the semi-finals to the Adelaide Oval, and I stayed with a couple from Prospect Cricket Club, Peter Crossing and his wife Deborah, and I'll see them next week when Prospect have their kind of eve of test dinner. So, made some mates along the way, but you get a very clear sense when you first come about Australian cricket and what's in the DNA. And I was writing a little bit about Alex Carey this week, and it struck me he's a classic tale of of Australian cricket, really, a bit of a grafter who, tried to get into AFL, was knocked back a couple of times, changed course, tried his hand at cricket, a couple of, humdrum jobs along the way before he did that. So he's got a bit of a hinterland, and he's had to strive and graft, and he's earned his stripes. I was listening to the speech that Adam Gilchrist gave when he gave him his cap. I thought it was a fantastic little 2 or 3 minute speech, actually, about the fact that it's not the cap itself that entitles you, but all the kind of hard work you've done along the way. And if you play with a bit of humility and integrity and commitment, then people will rally around you and support you. So I've always had this sense that Australian cricketers have had to earn their stripes. There's a bit of hard graft along the way. Clearly, they play tough, hard-nosed cricket, And to be honest, that's how I was brought up. I played league cricket in the north as a kid, around North Manchester, and that was the kind of cricket that we grew up playing as well. Pretty hard-nosed cricket. So obviously, a lot of admiration for Australian cricket. They've been hugely successful over the 20 or 30 years that I've been following it. But we've shown occasionally that we've had your measure as well. And the hope is that, we can show that over the next 3 games.
So, Athers, when I look at the way England are playing their cricket and have done now for a while, the question I have for you is, if we put it into let's put it into a golfing context, and you are coming up to play in the US Open where the rough is, 2 feet high, and you come into the tournament and you say, well, I just hit the ball long. I just hit it as far as I can. That's what I do. That's my game. I just bash it off the tee. And everyone sits there and looks at you and goes, well, that's all very well, mate, but the rough's 2 foot long. You're not going to make the cut playing like that. I don't care. That's how I play. So then you get to the tournament and you try and do that, and you plus 10 at the halfway mark, and you're packing your bags and getting your plane and flying home. That golfer at some stage has to go, if I want to play properly in majors, I can't play like this. I've got to temper that. I don't have to stop, and lose my strengths, but I've got to do it in a way that's going to work in these tournaments. Otherwise, I'm going to play well on the PGA Tour, but when it really matters in the majors, I'm going to be nowhere unless I adjust. So and I love Baz McCullum. He worked with us at 7. He was great fun to work with, and I really enjoy his company. But what I'd love to do is just sit quietly with him in a glass of red and say, Baz, there has to be times when you're accountable for the way you play. There has to be times when you say, this mightn't work in this game, so we've got to pull it back. And that's what I really enjoyed about Ben Stokes' 50 in Brisbane, because he looked at the game situation and he went, you know what? I'm going to go against what I really want to do, probably, because the game needs it. Is that something England aren't doing enough of and need to start doing?
Good question. Well, I'll throw Bryson DeChambeau back at you.
I was going to bring him up as well.
Yeah, he did win at Wingfoot.
On the tee, the rough is 10 foot long, and he says, well, I'm going to hit this 380 yards, and the other guys are only going to hit it 320. So even out of the rough, I've got a pitching wedge to the green, and they've got a 4-iron to the green. So I'll just throw that one out there for you.
And it's a good one.
I do believe. However, I agree with you. Test match cricket is about adapting to the game in front of you and about adapting to the conditions. And that's where I would be critical of England from time to time on 2 counts. One, when they get ahead of the game in the past, they haven't always nailed it. So again, to use a golf analogy, I was at the Masters the year that Tiger Woods came back and won it. It was a fantastic, best sporting thing I've ever seen or covered. I was covering it for the paper, actually. And he got ahead at Amen Corner, and I was round at Amen Corner watching him. And it's quite tricky at the Masters because you've got a time difference with newspaper deadlines. America's 5 hours ahead, so you're a bit up against it. The moment he got ahead around the turn at 13th, I think, I thought, well, I can just go and write this up. There is no way this guy, having got ahead of the game, is going to give it away. He is ruthless. And so it proved to be. He got up the 18th. He made one bad drive at the 18th, but otherwise a completely faultless run in. And that's where I'd be a bit critical about England from time to time. They should have beaten India at the Oval at the end of the summer. Root and Brook had that game in the palm of their hands, and then Harry Brook got out, Root followed, and then there was a bit of a collapse. And really at the Gabba, you know, if you go back to that first innings, Harry Brook is a fantastically talented player. I think he's going to be one of our great players by the end of his career. Fingers crossed that he is and he can fulfill that talent. But, you know, that was a bad shot in the first innings because you'll remember the situation. Obviously, Steve Smith had held back Mitchell Starc for an hour after that first break, brought him on just at the time the lights were coming into effect at 6 o'clock. I think it was Stark's first ball to Harry Brook. It was his second ball of that spell, but his first to Harry. And it was an extraordinarily wild shot at a wide ball. And that, of course, you know, let Australia back into the game. So you do have to adapt. Obviously, you have to play the conditions. But to be fair to them, that's what they've always said. If you said to them, you know, what are the principles behind their batting as a team under Stokes and McCullum, they would simply say, we want to pick players who have the ability to put the pressure on the bowlers and score quickly. We also need to absorb pressure when the going gets tough. Now, what they're not doing is that second bit well enough. I looked at the numbers since 2024, the start of 2024. They'd been bowled out under 40 overs in seven occasions in Test match cricket. Under 40 overs, which tells you something. That's an incredible number since the start of 2024. So what seems to be happening is that either when the conditions are a little bit tougher or when wickets start to tumble, they're not being tough enough to scrap through those particular situations. But I completely agree with their need to pick players who have the ability to put pressure back on the bowlers. I mean, you guys, you'll have seen it, you know, from the great Australian teams down the years. Looking to score and putting pressure on the bowlers is essential part of being a good team, I think. And that's been common to all the best teams that I've seen. I don't have a problem with that.
Athers, what about the criticism of Jofra Archer in that, you know, the last 10, 15 minutes when he was bowling at reasonable pace? It really was. I mean, he was over 150. It was fascinating viewing. I absolutely loved it. But, you know, you got guys like Ricky Ponting, who's in the Channel 7 commentary box going, well, where was this, you know, in the first Test match or in the first innings? I think Haydos was on Triple M, pretty much saying the same thing. But what interests me, and that's coming from an Australian point of view, of course, but what interests me, you've got Jimmy Anderson and Stuart Broad, who were teammates of Jofra Archer, and they're pretty much saying the same thing. You know, why is he picking and choosing when he bowls these quicker spells?
Well, I think the criticism of the bowling generally is fair, and Archer's, you know, one of four. You went from the first innings at Perth, where I thought England were fantastic as a unit in that first innings at Perth, that first day at Perth. You know, when speeds were up, I think they bowled on average of 87 miles an hour, which I think since the numbers have been run is the quickest a collective four has bowled for England. And then there was a big drop off in the second innings, and then that mark-up, as you say, from the first innings at Brisbane, which I thought collectively was the worst England bowling performance that I've seen under Stokes and McCullum, to then the passage of play that you're talking about between Archer and Smith. So they've been very up and down. And that's a fair criticism. You know, England have got to be better. They've got to be more consistent. You know, in that first innings at Brisbane, they were way too short, way too wide, and got cut to ribbons. Were there more than 200 runs behind square on the offside or something in that first innings at the Gabba, which tells you all you need to know about their kind of lack of accuracy and consistency. So, you know, they're fair criticisms of the bowling. It's got to be better, and Archer is one of four. He's the kind of the leader of the attack now, I suppose, in the absence of Mark Wood, who's gone home. So they've all got to step up. That's clear.
Hey, well, let's move on to your own amazing playing time. 115 Test matches, as the Big Doss said, lots against Australia. A very, very good English captain. Do you wake up at night, Athers, every now and then and go, if it hadn't been for Glenn McGrath, if I could just remove one bloke out of those 115 bloody Test matches. It was a golden era of his bowling, and you just happened to walk into pretty much all of it.
Absolutely. My God, yeah. I mean, I said at the start, I wasn't particularly looking forward to coming on this podcast faced with you three. I'm looking forward to about as much as I used to look forward to facing Pigeon. You're right, really. Of course, what happens at the end of your career is that people look at your record in the Ashes or against Australia, and mine would be regarded as, only relatively modest, really. Never won an Ashes series, didn't score masses, as many runs against Australia as I did against some other teams. But actually, you're right. If you look at it, there's a kind of pre-McGrath record and a post-McGrath record, and the two are very different. So, 94-5 when I came here as captain, had a pretty good series. I think, average 40 or something at the top of the order, which, is all right in a losing series as captain here. McGrath, well, he played the first test and bowled a heap of crap and then was dropped and came back to Perth. And it was that game at Perth where I thought, there's going to be a problem here, because I thought he bowled fantastically well. I think that was just before Australia went to the Caribbean and, kind of took the world title, if you want to call it that, unofficial world title from the West Indies under Tubby. And McGrath was obviously an essential part of that. And yeah, from that point on, I'm afraid he had my number. And so my numbers declined horribly. Yeah, well, I mean, what can I say? There's no way of hiding it. If you get out 19 times to a bowler, he's got your number. I'm afraid that's how it was. And, that's the great challenge of Test cricket, isn't it? 5 Test matches, tough series, coming up against an opening batter coming up against the same bowler time and time and time again. And if they find a chink in your armour, there is no escape, and that's what makes it a pretty brutal game at times.
But you also had this incredible record against Alan Donald, who was arguably the bowler of his generation. Lightning fast and just a superb Test match fast bowler. And yet that was a matchup that worked for you really well.
It wasn't pace that I struggled against. Alan Donald was, I think, amongst the 3 quickest bowlers that I faced. I'd put him there, bracket with Brett Lee and Shoaib Akhtar. All that, what it's like when you face these guys. It might only be 2 or 3 miles an hour difference, but it is a difference. You don't quite see the ball. The ball just, hits you before you're ready. And he was in that bracket. But, I didn't have a problem particularly against pace. I was, comfortable against pace. Well, in the manner that, batters are or are not. But I didn't kind of really feel it was a struggle. But McGrath was different because he was tight into the stumps. He was quick enough, but not rapid, but really didn't give you anything. And I was the type of batter who, I kind of basically looked to defend the good balls and hit the bad balls. But if you weren't getting any bad balls and you had McGrath at one end and probably in combination with Shane Warne for a lot of it at the other, you weren't getting a lot of bad balls. So I used to find myself a bit stuck. And, from a technical point of view, it's a boring technical point, but I get blocked off a little bit. So I struggled more against Sean Pollock, who was a bit similar to McGrath. He was very tight into the stumps than I did against Alan Donald. But it was fantastic to play against those guys. I mean, what an attack. McGrath, Gillespie, Lee, Warne. Great challenge.
It might be a little segue here, but McGrath, I was thinking, who would be the one bloke that actually would just be waiting at first slip and hoping that Michael Atherton nicks off to McGrath and the king is sitting there. So I want to talk to you about Shane Warne, not as the player, because we all know how great the king was, but I want to talk to you about the king as the broadcaster and some of those really unique memories I'm sure you have about him with Sky. That he really lent into that English space. He was loved. He was revered. He was almost as much part of England as what he was Australia. And that unique perspective he had on that country. He took people in England to a very special place. I mean, not only with his bowling, but just in general, he was that sort of bloke from next door that you could go down and share a chip buddy with after a couple of pints at the pub.
He was, yeah. I think probably after Richie Benaud, no Australian cricketer was more loved in England. So Benaud, obviously, and I worked with Richie a bit right at the start of my broadcasting career, which was a great privilege. Fantastic bloke. And, you know, he covered English summers for, I don't know, 20, 30 years. So he was absolutely part of the furniture. And when he finally gave up the microphone, which was right at the end of that 2005 series, that was his last broadcast at the Oval, you know, the whole ground stood to him. It kind of was announced over the PA system that, you know, Richie's just done his last stint. And it was very similar. There's an older broadcaster, I don't know whether you heard of him, called John Arlott, many, many years before, who did exactly the same thing at Lord's, and the ground stood to him. And then the Oval stood to Richie. So Richie was an absolutely essential part of our cricketing summer. And then after that, Warne took over that mantle, really. You know, our commentary box at Lord's, the Sky commentary box, because obviously we have the domestic rights for Test cricket in England. So our commentary box at Lord's is still, all the walls are festooned with Shane Warne imagery, you know, and it would be hard to imagine an Australian commentary box being the same way. I know you have Michael Vaughan here and you have other English commentators, but I can't imagine that, you know, you would decorate Seven's commentary box with images of English cricketers. It just wouldn't happen. So Warne was loved here. He obviously played at Hampshire for many years as a domestic player as well. So we saw him in and around county cricket. You know, our memories of the Ashes go right back to 1993 at Old Trafford, that very first ball, a game I played in the ball of the century, which spun around Gat unbelievably to get one round Gat. Right through 2005. And I thought, you know, we saw the best of a great cricketer in 2005, ironically, because it was the only Ashes series that he lost. But in that series where all you guys wilted, Haydos, you know, under the pump, you guys all wilted. The one bloke who didn't was Warne with what did he get? 40 wickets and
it was
250
extraordinary
runs or something. And then he became a central part of our commentary team at Sky. We all love working with him. Well, I remember the day he died, I was on a plane to Antigua. England were about to play in the Caribbean. And a photographer, you'll know him, Phil Brown, is an Aussie, fantastic photographer. And he was sitting just across the way from me, and he walked over, and his eyes were red-rimmed eyes. He'd obviously been crying, and he must have had internet, you know, where he was sitting. And he said to me, "Warne's died." And I have never been more kind of shocked, really. You know, a guy with the amount of energy and life that he had. You know, when Phil said to me, he's gone, I really couldn't believe it. So very sad. Great memories of him. The thing I always loved about Warne, actually, just away from cricket, was a very simple thing that in the commentary box, you know what it's like. You've got the commentators, you've got producers, runners. There's a whole range of people in there. He would treat everybody exactly the same. And he would always, if a runner came in, he would always introduce himself. He'd put out his hand and say, "Hi, I'm Shane Warne." And that seems a very simple thing, but I think it speaks volumes. He didn't assume that some young kid knew who he was. He kind of introduced himself. And I always liked that about him. He was a fairly regular bloke, despite, I mean, you know, he was a kind of superstar in many ways. But in his day-to-day engagement with people, he was pretty regular. So I always liked that about him.
Yeah, we all miss Warne, and one of his big things, as you said, was manners. Like he was a stickler for just the basic things like manners. While we've got you, Athers, I think you're a great, you know, person to talk to about cricket in general, like where Test match cricket is going? Obviously, the Ashes is not going anywhere. I don't think it's ever been as popular. I mean, I worked on that 2005 Ashes series over there in the UK where Haydos,
Wilted.
Warne started changing the fields, didn't he? Stopping his boundaries, and he couldn't bloody handle it. But apart from Ashes, where do you see Test cricket going, Athers? I'd love to hear where you think the game is in
Great
15
question.
years' time.
Well, as you say, I mean, the Ashes just seems to get bigger and bigger, doesn't it? All the build up to this series, I don't think it just seems to be bigger every 2 years. Whenever the Ashes come around, there's ever more noise around it. I don't know what your figures have been like this year on telly.
Enormous.
I'm sure they've been red hot. There's huge interest back home. Whether that interest will tail off or not, I don't know. You know, there's apparently 20,000 of the Barmy Army and England supporters have got tickets for the MCG. So there's going to be a huge number of people over here at Christmas and New Year, and fingers crossed that, the series is live and good cricket follows. But in general, I'm not that optimistic about Test cricket more generally. And I felt that just the game has changed rapidly. From the moment the IPL came along in 2008, I just sensed that was cricket's disruption moment, in a way many industries have been disrupted. That was cricket being disrupted there and then. Test cricket and international cricket had a monopoly on the game up till that point. And the moment the IPL came along, T20 and franchise cricket was going to challenge Test cricket and international cricket because players have got options now. There's a story a couple of weeks ago in England that our top players are going to be paid up to 400 grand now for playing in the 100, which is a 3-week tournament, effectively 3-week franchise tournament. So the incentives in the game have changed hugely. And, the incentives now are not only to play international cricket and Test cricket. So once those incentives are completely switched, then the game is challenged. And that's really what's been playing out over the last 15 years since the IPL came along. And I don't see those trends changing anytime soon. And that will just accelerate, I think. I mean, I don't know what will happen here. Probably private investment will come into the BBL before long. They seem to be banging that drum that Australian cricket is broke and needs the money. So, I should imagine private investment will come and then the incentives will switch here, and that will accelerate some of the changes that we've seen. So that's just going to carry on, I think. And I don't see a way. It's too late now. I don't see a way to stop that.
I don't laugh out loud watching cricket coverage very often, but I'm going to take you back to I don't know where it was, might have been Trent Bridge, and a bird was annoying your coverage somehow. A tiny little bird was near a speaker and was making these squeaking noises. And I don't know why I was watching because Australia weren't playing and you were on comms. And I might get this sentence wrong, but you said something along the lines of, speaking of small little annoying things that make high-pitched noises, Nasser Hussain. I cried. I literally watching the television going, that is properly funny. And it was just a golden piece of commentary. Tell us about Nas, because you've worked with him for a long time too, and he's an iconic character.
Yeah, he's up in the Adelaide Hills at the moment. He's kind of relaxing. But we're here doing, obviously I'm here writing for the paper that I work for, but also doing some stuff for Sky around the edges. We don't have the live rights there with TNT at the moment. But as you know, given that we're sitting on a podcast, this is the kind of podcast Ashes. Everybody's got a podcast.
Yep.
So we have one with Sky, and I've enjoyed doing that with Nas over the last couple of years. But I've known Nas almost all my life. We played together. First time was England under-15s. There used to be a festival. It was north of England, south, west, east, under-15s, and they would pick the England under-15s team from that festival. And that's when I first saw Nas. He had a full head of hair then. He was a leg spinner who batted down the order. And everybody, he kind of had this big reputation. And everybody said to me, "You got to watch out for this kid. He's a fantastic leg spinner. He's going to be the next big thing." And then he got the yips. He couldn't bowl a hoop downhill. He couldn't land it. He had to make himself into a batter, and he became a pretty good one and an excellent England captain. So I've known him really since then. England under 15s. We toured England under 19s together, and played obviously quite a bit for England, and then have commentated together from Sky. And as you know, part of commentary is having a variety of voices, but you need to have that chemistry as well with people. It's good, if you're on their wavelength and you know what makes them tick and what their sense of humor is. And that's all part of, having hopefully a half decent commentary team.
Boys, we've worked together a long time, and the other day I went on the Sky podcast with Athers and Nas, and I have never seen Athers so excited as when the topic of the dodgy Brisbane Test match came up with that horrific toss. You should have seen he was smiling like a Cheshire cat, Athers. So you love to rib each other as well.
Well, you've got to have a sense of humor. You've got to be able to laugh at yourselves. And given how our England careers went, particularly against Australia, if you're not going to laugh at yourself, you're in trouble. Just going back to the current England team, I admire the way they've gone about it on that beach in Noosa, to be honest, because, a couple of the journos have turned up. I saw there were a couple of posters, RIP Bazball or whatever it is. And Ben Stokes, to his great credit, stood for photographs. And I thought, well, good on you. When you're getting battered, everybody just wants to hide away in a darkened room. That's your natural instinct, but it's a bad thing to do. You got to get out there, front up, take it on the chin, and you got to be able to laugh at yourself as well. We all know it's a serious business when you get on the park, and you've got to give it your absolute all for your country. But you do have to be able to laugh at yourself as well when it all goes horribly wrong. So credit to them for that. And as you say in our commentary, I noticed, Bluey, is that when there was a grubber to Ben Duckett at the Gabba, was it yours that they constantly put out there? There was a grubber to you, wasn't there, a few years ago, and that seems to run on
Curtly Ambrose in Perth. Yep,
Curtly, and we have the same with Nas. We have one. Carl Hooper got him in the Caribbean. One that just rolled along the deck, and you just have that there, ready for whenever somebody gets a grubber. And it seemed to me that they have that ready for you as well, like Curtly Ambrose ball, another thing.
Hey, Athers, the commonly used phrase with Australians is we barrack for our team very strongly, and then we barrack next for whoever's playing against England. Whether it's cricket or soccer or rugby, or it doesn't matter who it is, that's the commonly used phrase. But I always say to people, English cricket people are actually wonderful people. We've all played league cricket over there. I had a couple of stints, Lancashire one stint, and down in Dulwich in the Surrey Championship. And you won't meet better people. And then the English team comes out, and I think it's sad these days you don't play tour matches anymore. But when we used to play those tour matches against the Poms, you had a drink with them afterwards, and they're just great blokes. So that's the thing I always say to people. After we get rid of the bollocks, they're actually really good people, and there's a bloody good relationship and respect, don't you think?
I would hope so. I loved playing against Australia. I get on well with the guys when I see them now who I did play against. In the commentary box, I bumped into Tubby last week, and Heels and Dizzy, these guys that played quite a bit against, and thoroughly enjoyed playing against them and enjoy seeing them now. It's full on the field, isn't it? Ashes cricket, as it should be. There should be absolutely no quarter given or asked. And once that's done, though, I think you put that to one side until the next time, battle commences. But Beefy said something, I think, at the start of the trip. I think he did a promo with Greg Chappell for something, or it might have been Steve, I can't remember. But he said, and Beefy has, handed out as much stick as anybody to Aussies down the years, particularly on the field when he had a great Ashes record. And he said something like it was his dad who always said to him, if you want somebody at your back, then you want an Aussie. And I think he was referring to, the kind of war and hostilities in the war and all that kind of thing. But I hope that's how people feel, it's full on the field. But once the battle's over, you have a beer, shake hands, look them in the eye, say, well done, and we'll get you next time. And that's, to me, how it's always been. And I hope how it always will be.
Athers, where are you in your career, mate? Are you going strong, or I know Sky Sports have paid you a fortune over the years, so you're probably sitting on a rather large nest egg there. You've got a place in Barbados. I'm not sure if you still got that. No, you've sold that.
No, I'm going all right.
Going all right?
Cracking on, but 57, but feel all right, kind of holding it together somehow. I've come down to Adelaide. My lad is here, actually. He's playing for Sturt Cricket Club this winter. So very nice to see him. We had oysters together at Glenelg yesterday, and it's been good to catch up with him. So kids are growing up and moved on, and but I'm still enjoying the work. I still really enjoy the writing and the commentary. We have, our domestic. We have all the domestic rights. We have rights for ICC cricket. We don't have as many Test match rights now as we used to, but we, the way the media game has changed, you can still do stuff around it. And I thoroughly enjoy it. Actually, stay curious, stay interested. Try not to sound like Fred Truman, back in my day. Keep aware of how the game is changing. And, I've, to go back to where we started, thoroughly enjoyed watching this England team under Stokes and McCullum. They've given me some of the best moments that I've seen watching an England team in the long years that I've been doing it. And I've admired that, and I hope they can, show their best side in the next 3 games rather than what we've seen so far. But no, still enjoying it. Stay curious, keep interested. And keep going for a bit, hopefully.
I know you've got to go
on the shoulder.
That's coming to all of us. I know we've got to let you go. You're a busy man. We asked this question of our guests. Who didn't you play with, Athers, that you would love to have? An example is, for me, it's Keith Miller, and he finished playing well before I was born. But the legend of Keith Miller, I just think what an awesome thing it would be to be able to play a game of cricket with that bloke. Is there someone for you that you didn't play with that you now look back and think, geez, I would have loved to play with him?
Well, I wouldn't have minded Shane Warne on our team. I'll tell you that for start. If you could give me a pick of any player from the teams I played against, I'd certainly take him. I loved watching that West Indies team of my youth, kind of mid-80s, late 80s, early 90s team that I did play a little bit against, but I thought Viv Richards was the most charismatic cricketer that I've seen. I mean, I remember the first test I played against those guys, Headingley in 91, and their attack was Patterson, Ambrose, Walsh, Marshall, captained by Viv. And I just watched them warm up, and that was enough to kind of... They were an incredible team, charismatic, fantastic team to watch. If you said to me, if to take one English cricketing hero from the past, I'm going to go way back to Bodyline. Give me Harold Larwood. Absolutely fantastic, working class hero, guy who was working down the mines at 14. He took his dad's pit pony down the mines. He used to walk to Trent Bridge 8 miles a day, 8 miles back to do his cricket, and came out here in Bodyline, and obviously with Jardine won that famous series for England, and then was really ostracised by the English cricketing establishment. And he ended up moving out here, ironically.
You did, yeah.
He ran a sweet shop in Blackpool for many years after his career finished. And then somebody said to him, why don't you come to Oz? They'll appreciate you a bit more there than here. So he did that. And I think he's one of the great, not forgotten characters, because there has been a brilliant biography written of him, but I think one of the great underappreciated heroes of our cricketing history. So give me Harold Larwood to run in
I
this
love
week
it.
and brightens
I
up
love
the
it.
Aussie.
Well, we appreciate what you've done for us, mate. I know you've got to go. Thank you so much. You, as I said, not only we all love the way you play the game, but now the way you look at it, both in print and on the microphone, is just brilliant. So thanks, Athers. Really appreciate it, mate.
Thanks, Athers.
Pleasure, guys. Thanks for looking after me.
Good
See
man.
ya, Athers.
Yeah, we'll let Athers switch himself off. But boys, what a joy, and great catching up with you two both. By the way, we're going to let everyone go. All over bar the cricket's what it's called. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube or listen wherever you enjoy your podcasts. Actually, we should mention Athers. Have we still got you, Athers? Your podcast is called
Yeah.
Yep.
It's the Sky Cricket Podcast.
Sky Cricket Podcast. So make sure you get around that too, because Athers and Nas very worth listening to always. And then get on Instagram and follow us as well. Thank you very much. We'll see you next week all over bar the cricket.